A very good morning to all meditators, brothers and sisters in the Dharma. This evening, I shall continue to discuss about the Four Noble Truths. As you know, the teachings of the Buddha is based on the Four Noble Truths. If one wishes to understand the teachings of the Buddha, then one must study the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, and one must practice the Dharma, in other words, to develop the Noble Eightfold Path in order to realize the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. So that we can only realize the teachings of the Four Noble Truths through direct experience, through personal experience. So during the practice of mindful meditation, we also have to realize in the ultimate aim, we have to realize the Four Noble Truths through personal experience. So in other words, we have to follow the path, the middle path, in other words, the Noble Eightfold Path, by the practice of Satipatthana meditations, in order to realize the truth by ourselves. In other words, we have to realize the truth through the practice of Satipatthana meditation. So the Buddha has taught us the way, the path. So we have to follow the path closely. We have to realize the truth by ourselves. We cannot realize the truth by hearing from others or by reading the books and so on. Similarly, in the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditations, we have to practice based on a personal experience. In other words, we have to be mindful of every phenomenon, either a mental phenomenon or physical phenomenon, based on personal experience. We have to be mindful of every phenomenon as it really occurs. In other words, meditators have to discover the experience by themselves. We all know that all mental and physical phenomena are not permanent, subject to arising and passing away. It is not satisfactory or dukkha, and no self or non-self, anatta. We know the characteristics. We know the characteristics of the phenomena, or the characteristics of existence. But this is but we do not know it through first-hand experience or first-hand knowledge. We know it by listening from others, by listening from Dharma talk or by readings. So this is known as second-hand knowledge. So the second knowledge is not good enough to overcome the mental defilements. The second knowledge may help us to lessen the mental defilements, but it's not possible to uproot the mental defilements completely. Even one is endowed with a lot of second knowledge, a lot of scripture knowledge, or has been listening to many Dharma talks. But what one has gained is a second knowledge. That knowledge does not belong to oneself. So what is emphasized here is to gain the first-hand knowledge by the practice of Satipatthana meditation. In other words, we have to gain the first-hand knowledge of what is impermanence, anicca, dukkha, unsatisfactory, anatta, or no self, or non-self. So in other words, every mindfulness meditator has to learn to see the object as it really occurs, not influenced by second knowledge, or not to be influenced by any hints. Sometimes your good Dharma friends or someone may give you some hints on what to see, what to realize during the practice of mindfulness meditation. They may give you the hint what to see while mindful of the movement of abdomens, rising, falling, and so on. So in one's practice is being influenced by the hints given by others, then one's practice could not be practiced freely. One could be looking or searching for the experience in accordance with the hints given by the good friends or others. Then one may not be able to see or realize mental and physical phenomena as they really occur. So that's why we always emphasize that the practice of mindfulness like a journey of self-discovery. Every meditator has to discover the experience by himself or by herself. If someone gives you the hints, what to look for, what to experience during meditations, then this is against the spirits of the teacher of Dharma. It's against the spirits of mindfulness meditation or Vipassana meditation. So, in fact, we only give the instructions how to develop mindfulness, how to note the object which is arising at that present moment. We do not give any hints what to realize, what to experience. But sometimes some teachers or good Dharma friends may give you the hints. Sometimes maybe to arouse your interest so that you know the directions of the practice and so on. For example, sometimes those who have experience in mindfulness meditation may give the hints to the beginners. For example, while mindful of the movements of abdomens, you must see the process of rising, falling. It's a long process, it's a short process, it's a rapid process, or it's a slow process, and try to see the gap between the movements of rising and falling and so on. Actually, all these are experience of mindfulness meditation. Meditators have to discover themselves. But sometimes some meditators could not realize anything. They do not know what to see because maybe they do not take much interest in the practice. So someone may tell them what to see, what to look for. So in that way they may have some interest and so on. But they should not always rely on someone to give them the hints, what to see, what to experience and so on. It's totally against the spirits of Dharma, because the spirit of Dharma is a journey of self-discovery. In other words, you have to experience first-hand. You have to gain the first-hand experience on what is impermanence, or what is dukkha, what is anatta. So if one does not take much interest in the practice, if one does not put in enough effort into practice, then one may not gain much experience. But one who has put forth enough effort in the practice, then they may begin to realize some experience. Then the teachers or someone who is experienced enough guiding him or her may give him or her further instructions, or to encourage him or her to put more effort in the practice. So mindfulness meditation is very important in a spiritual journey. It's a journey of self-discovery, self-realization. That's why one of the attributes of the Dharma, Pachatam Veditabo Vinyuhi, is, in other words, the Dharma has to be realized by everyone, by the wise one. So these attributes, in fact, refer to the experience or realizations of supra-mundane Dharma. So when we practice mindful meditations, insight meditations, the ultimate aims is to realize the Four Noble Truths by personal experience or direct experience. So in the last talk, we discussed about the first Noble Truth, the truth of suffering. In brief, the five aggregates of clinging are suffering. The second Noble Truth is the truth of the cause or the origin of suffering, which is tanha. Tanha is translated as craving, or sometimes it's translated as attachments. So the cause of suffering is also an object of mindfulness meditation. So in other words, the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering are the objects of mindfulness meditation. Or in other words, the objects of mindfulness meditation are the five aggregates. The five aggregates are aggregates of physicality, the aggregates of feeling or sensation, or the aggregates of perceptions. The fourth is the aggregates of formations, and the fifth is the aggregates of consciousness. So aggregates of formation is known as Sankhara Khanda. Sankhara Khanda consists of 52 mental concomitants in the teachings of Abhidhamma. But out of 52 mental concomitants, feelings and perceptions are considered two different aggregates. So Sankhara Khanda here does not consist of 52 mental concomitants, because the aggregates of feeling and aggregates of perceptions are two of the mental concomitants. And another mental concomitants is tanha. So tanha is the cause of suffering. So in other words, meditators have to be mindful of this truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering. They are the objects of mindfulness meditation. They are objects of Vipassana meditation. Why we say that they are the objects of Vipassana meditation? It's because when mindfulness meditators are able to mindful any objects or any phenomenon attentively, precisely, and energetically, then they may gain some experiences or insight knowledge, or even enlightenments. So, in other words, whatever objects or phenomenon that's arising in your mind or body at that present moment can be taken as an objects of Vipassana meditation. So, as long as the meditators understand the guideline or the principle of mindfulness meditation and the technique, then they would know what should be mindful at that present moment. Sometimes some meditators ask a question during the interview. They ask whether or not they can mindful of this object or that this object or that object. Whether meditators can mindful of this object or that object is not determined by the teachers. It's determined by the Dharma. Or in other words, is determined by the guideline of mindfulness meditation. Because Dharma, the word Dharma is difficult to be translated. But in the practice of mindfulness meditation, Dharma means mental and physical phenomena. Or in a wider sense, Dharma means the Four Noble Truths. So when there's object arising in one's mind and body, then one has to be mindful of that object as it really occurs. And when the mindfulness and concentration are not yet strong enough, meditators could sense that there are 2-3 phenomena are happening at almost at the same moment. That's why we lay down a guideline, a principle. That's to be mindful of the most distinct object. So when mindfulness meditators are mindful at that present moment, they are always mindful of the most distinct object that's arising in the body. But sometimes when meditators are mindful, the distinct object that's arising in the body, yet the mind is thinking or wondering, or if there's any mental state arising at that time, then meditators should be mindful of that mental state immediately, regardless whether that mental state is very strong or is not so strong. It's because our mind cannot do two things at the same time. When there's thinking, there's no mindfulness. So when the mindfulness has arising, then the most likely thinking has disappeared. And the mind is very near to us. If one's mind is very alert, one could realize the arising of any mental states very instantly. So the mind is very near to us. So meditation is mental training or mental cultivation. That's why we always give priority to the mental state that's arising at that moment. When a mental state has disappeared, then meditators should be quick enough to mindful of one of the distinct objects that's arising in the body. If they are quite slow to mindful of one object in the next moment, then there'll be another thinking arising. So sometimes the mind is very quick. In other words, sometimes meditators think that the wandering mind or thinking mind is very quick, very rapid. But as you know, mindfulness is also one of the mental processes, one of the mental states. At the beginning of practice, mindfulness is quite slow, quite sluggish. So we need to develop the mindfulness. We need to push the mind so that the mindfulness is also getting swifter or faster and faster, so that it could catch or realize the arising of thinking mind immediately. So we have to put forth effort so that the mindfulness is also very swift to perceive the arising of any mental states and to realize the instant arising and passing away of every object. So the second noble truth, tanha, craving, desire, longing, and so on, is also the objects of mindfulness meditation, vipassana meditation. So there are, as you know, there are three kinds of tanha or craving, as explained in the scriptures. The first is known as kama tanha, or craving for desirable objects. The second is bhava tanha, craving associated with the eternity view. And the third, vibhava tanha, craving that's associated with the view of annihilations. It is important to know what's the meaning of the view of eternity and the view of annihilations. So tanha can arise because there's a condition or there's a cause. Nothing can arise without a condition or cause. So in other words, the teachings of conditionality is very profound. It's also one of the very important teachings of the Buddha. If one wishes to understand the teaching better, clearly, they have to study the teaching of Four Noble Truths, the teaching of conditionality, in other words, the teachings of dependent originations. They have to realize nama rupa. So these teachings are very profound. Without understanding these profound teachings, one may not be able to understand much of the teachings of the Buddha. You have to realize that these teachings are only found in the teachings of Buddha or the Buddha Sasana. So there are some books explain that, as well as the commentaries. There are these four profound teachings. One is the teaching of Four Noble Truths. The other is the teachings of conditionality. And the third is the teaching of anatta. So teaching of anatta is only found in the teaching of Buddha. So just now, it's not about nama rupa. It's the teachings of anatta. And the fourth is the rebirth. The rebirth. Only the Buddha can see clearly the consciousness that passed away in the last moment, and the arising of the rebirth consciousness in the next moment. So it's difficult to understand this teaching well by learning from the book or by listening from others, or by thinking, by philosophical thinking and so on. We can understand this profound teaching better and better by the practice of Satipatthana meditation, where we develop insight knowledge or wisdoms. And this insight knowledge or wisdoms is developed through direct experience, through personal experience, by the practice of Satipatthana meditation, mindfulness meditation. So, tanha arises due to a cause. The cause here is DT. DT means wrong view. So one thinks that there's a everything self or soul, or there's an everything entity. For example, residing in a body. Some teachings hold the view that there's a permanent soul residing in a body. When a person has passed away, this soul will leave the body and take birth in another body again. So this is wrong view in accordance to the teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes those who do not understand the teaching well, they may take the consciousness as a soul. So when a person passes away, the consciousness will leave the body and so on. This because they could not realize that the consciousness of the mind is also arising and passing away very quickly, swifter than the physical phenomenon. In accordance with the teachings of Abhidharma, consciousness is arising and passing away 17 times faster than a physical process. But those who do not understand the true nature of the mind or consciousness, then they may think this consciousness like the other teachings. Other teachings say that there's a soul. When a person passes away, the body will subject to decay, then eventually perish. So the soul has to look for another body in order to take birth again. And sometimes, some who do not understand the teaching may think that there's a soul wandering for 7 days or 49 days. Then the soul will only take birth again. So they may think there's a wandering soul. Sometimes they think this wandering soul wandering here and there near the house and so on. So in the teaching, this is known as antarabhava, intermediate states. Intermediate states before the soul takes birth again. But this is also another wrong view. As you know, there are 3 kinds of craving: kama tanha, bhava tanha, and vibhava tanha. Kama tanha is craving for desirable objects, craving for sensual objects. Even one who has craving, for example, for Deva world or jhana of formless realms and so on. These are all craving for something that's very desirable, very much desire. Bhava tanha, some book translated as craving for existence. The translation may not be accurate. If one has craving for existence, this is also kama tanha. For example, some people accumulate merits with the wish to be born wealthy again, or to be born in the Deva world. So to be born wealthy or Deva world is something very much desire. So this kama tanha. So craving that's associated with the eternal view is not bhava tanha. This eternal view arises because of DT. It's one of the extreme view of DT. Vibhava tanha, craving associates with the view of annihilations. In other words, one has the wrong view that there's only one life. There's no rebirth. When one has passed away, everything will be vanishing. There's no more birth. So this knows the view of annihilations. In other words, a being is annihilated at death. There's no more birth in the future. So this is another extreme view of DT. So in other words, as long as one does not realize the true natures of mental physical phenomena, then they may identify this mental and physical phenomena as a self, everlasting self, or everlasting entity. In other words, it's because one is ignorant of the true nature of mental and physical phenomena, then DT arises. So when there's a DT, that DT or wrong view of everlasting self, everlasting soul, or there's an everlasting being. So this wrong view, these notions of an everlasting self will give rise to other defilements, for example, craving. So when you have this idea of I, there's a permanent I would desire for sensual pleasures. I desires for present feeling and so on. If the feeling is not agreeable and is not pleasant, then it could cause another defilements to arise, aversions or hatreds. So when there's aversion, then it can give rise to a craving to get rid of that object which is not pleasant, not agreeable, and so on. So in other words, one would create unwholesome karma. So during the practice of mindfulness meditation, we have to overcome this wrong view or DT. So the view of eternity holds that there's an everlasting self, everlasting soul. They hold a view that everything is permanent or everlasting. But the view of annihilation holds that this self or soul only lasts for one life or lasts for one existence. The self or soul will be annihilated at the moment of death. There's no more rebirth. So this wrong view can arise because of ignorance. So this ignorance can be removed by wisdoms. Only wisdoms, panya, has a power to overcome ignorance, to remove the ignorance. So that's why we have to practice mindfulness meditation, satipatthana meditation, in order to develop wisdoms. So in order to develop wisdoms, then meditators have to be mindful of all the mental and physical phenomena as they really are. So whatever object or phenomenon that's arising at that present moment, meditators have to be mindful of it as it really occurs. They do not have to think that this object is impermanent. They do not have to think that this object is dukkha or anatta. They have to be mindful of every object as it really occurs. In other words, that mindfulness leads to direct experience of the object as it is. When you're mindful of any object, at the moment of mindfulness, the mind is experiencing directly the process of that object. You do not have to think this process is impermanent. You do not have to think this process is dukkha or anatta. At the beginning of practice, the experience is not so clear because the mindfulness not attentive, precise, and the concentration is not deep enough. For example, as you're mindful of the process of bowing down, when you pay attention to it, you may make mental noting, bowing. So at that time, the mind is experiencing this process of bowing down as it really occurs. At the beginning of practice, the experience is not clear. So meditators need to be patient and have to increase the effort gradually. If there's no effort, then it's not possible to develop the mindfulness and to attain deeper concentration. So meditators mindful of this process bowing down, that mindfulness leads the mind to experience the process of movements as it really occurs. When meditators mindful of the pain and make a mental note, pain, that mental noting leads the mind to experience the painful sensation as it really occurs. Meditator did not have to think this pain is dukkha, or this pain is no self. They have to experience the object as it really occurs. So when meditators could mindful of every object as it really occurs, in other words, they could experience the process of every object, of the process of every phenomenon as it really occurs, from one process of phenomenon to next process, from one mental process, sometimes another mental process arising. Then when one mental process has disappeared, maybe there's a physical process, for example, the rising movements appear, then they mindful, in other words, they experience that process of rising as it really occurs. So when mindfulness is getting attentive, precise and energetic, gradually the experience on the ultimate reality, in other words, the Paramattha Dhamma, is getting clearer and clearer. So when experience on the ultimate reality is getting clearer and clearer, eventually meditators will realize the ultimate reality. First of all, the specific characteristics of the phenomena. For example, meditators experience that at that moment there's a process of rising movements, or there's a process of falling movements. When meditators are mindful of pain, meditators realize there's a process of painful sensation. Meditators could not sense a body form, because at that time meditators could pay full attention in order to experience the specific nature or the individual characteristics of the phenomena. For example, there's only a process of movements. At the beginning of practice, meditators cannot go beyond the concepts. For example, my mind is observing that object. My abdomen is moving. My legs is moving, and so on. No meditators can go beyond this concept or the form at the beginning of practice. But when they could develop the mindfulness, strengthen the power of mindfulness, in other words, when the mindfulness is attentive, precise on the object, and the mind is quite energetic, then they could realize the ultimate reality clearly. There's only a process of movements, or there's only a process of pain. Or during walking meditation, meditators experience there's a process of lifting movements, a process pushing movements, and so on. So the meditators could realize the specific characteristics of the phenomena clearly, then they only come to realize the three common characteristics of mental and physical phenomena. In other words, meditators could realize every process of movements is arising and passing away very instantly. Every process of bowing movements is arising and passing away very instantly. At that time, meditators would not realize the process of bowing down as a single process. They if the mindfulness and concentration are very strong, they will realize that there's a series of broken movements. In other words, there's a process of a very brief process of bowing down. Then there's another brief process of bowing down, and a brief process of bowing down. So meditators experience a series of broken movements, of a very quick process of bowing down, or instant process of bowing down, one after another. So at the times, meditators could not see any everlasting phenomena. There's no everlasting self. There's no everlasting entity, except the instant arising and passing away of the mental and physical phenomena. And during the practice, meditators also could realize the cause and effect, or the conditionality of the mind or the consciousness and the object. So this experience is very important and is the foundation of the progress. The view of eternity and the view of annihilation arise because they could not see everything is arising due to a condition. Because they could not see the condition, then they have the view everything is eternal. Or on the other extreme views, they may think this self only lasts temporarily, only lasts for one life or one existence. But one who realizes the teaching of conditionality, cause and effect, one could overcome this what called DT, and the other, in other words, the two extreme wrong views, the view of eternity and the view of annihilation. So if the meditators could follow the guideline of Satipatthana meditation, they would see the cause and effect, the relationship between the mind, in other words, the mind and the physical phenomena, or the mind, in other words, the mindfulness and the arising of the object, and then the relationship and the movements and action and so on. So I shall explain in more details in the next talk how meditators could overcome these two extreme views during the practice of mindfulness meditation. So I wish all meditators always bear in mind the guideline and the technique of Satipatthana meditation, so that you could gain the right experience, or the personal experience of the Four Noble Truths, and remove ignorance and other mental defilements.